The Cold War. Tensions after World War II. Stalin and the Soviet Union feared the capitalist West. Stalin wasn't prepared to give up control of Eastern Europe. Western leaders feared communism, and American leaders didn't want to give up the power and prestige the U.S. had gained. Containing the spread of communism. In 1947, U.S. President Harry Truman formed the Truman Doctrine. The Truman Doctrine provides money to countries like Greece and Turkey that were threatened by communist expansion. The Truman Doctrine was followed by the European Recovery Program, also known as the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan provided $13 billion to rebuild war in Europe to prevent the spread of communism. Containment of the Soviet Union became formal U.S. policy. The Berlin Blockade. At the end of World War II, the Allied powers had divided Germany into 4 zones. The city of Berlin in the Soviet zone was also divided into 4 zones. In 1948, the U.S., Great Britain, France wanted to unify the 3 western sections of Germany and Berlin and create a West German government. In response to this, the Soviets created a blockade of West Berlin to halt the creation of a separate West German state and have economic control of Berlin. The people inside couldn't receive food or supplies, so the solution to this problem was the Berlin Airlift, in which supplies would be flown in by American and British airplanes. And by May of 1949, the Soviet Union lifts the blockade to avoid another world war. These are some of the major events that came with the Cold War. And with a war, there's always alliances. So now we're moving on to the military alliances. The U.S. feared the spread of communism, so countries looked for security during the Cold War. On April 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is formed. It consisted of Belgium, Luxembourg, France, the Netherlands, Great Britain, Italy, Portugal, and Iceland. Turkey, Greece, and West Germany joined later. Now, in 1955, you get the Warsaw Pact, which consisted of European states like the Soviet Union, Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. The main thing was, if someone attacked you, we help you. That's what these military alliances, that's why they were formed. If one of these are attacked, now they all have to help. Or someone has to help. By the mid-1950s, the U.S. was in military alliances with 42 states around the world. Now, in order to be prepared for any invasions or any attacks, you have to obviously build up power. So now we're moving to building power. In the mid-1950s, the U.S. and the Soviet Union raced to build their armies and increase the size of their weapon arsenal. They raced to build the deadlier nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union set off its first atomic bomb in 1949. The U.S. and the Soviet Union developed the hydrogen bomb in the early 1950s. So these people were pretty much getting ready. By the late 1950s, both had intercontinental ballistic missiles, which allowed them to send bombs anywhere. In 1957, the Soviet Union launches Sputnik 1, the first human-made satellite to orbit Earth. Now, coming back to Berlin, you have the Berlin Wall. Nikita Khrushchev, he emerges as leader of the Soviet Union in 1955, and on August 1961, Khrushchev takes advantage of the American concerns over missiles and builds a massive concrete block wall, 15 feet high, topped with barbed wire, around West Berlin. It had hundreds of machine guard watchers. Why did he build this? Well, East Germans were tired of communist repression in Germany. So the wall was built to stop East German refugees from escaping East Germany by fleeing through West Berlin. The Berlin Wall became a symbol of division between the two powers. Now we turn to China and how they play in the Cold War. But first we have to take a look at China after World War II. The two Chinese governments were the nationalist government and the communist government. The nationalist government was led by Chiang Kai-shek, and I apologize if I cannot pronounce those names. And the communist government was led by Mao Zedong. In 1946, they tried forming a coalition government, but failed and resulted in civil war. The communist government had the People's Liberation Army, which eventually threw Chiang Kai-shek and his followers. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong makes his victory statement on the rostrum of the Gate of Heavenly Peace in Beijing. Now, under the rule of Mao Zedong, communism rules China. In 1955, the Chinese government launches a new program to build a socialist society. Chinese leaders hoped this would increase food production, but it didn't. The Chinese population was growing, and by 1957, China had 657 million people. In 1958, Mao begins the Great Leap Forward, where 700,000 collective farms are combined into 26,000 vast communes. The Great Leap Forward was meant to speed up economic growth, but it failed due to bad weather, droughts, floods, and the people's hatred of the system. 15 million people died of starvation, and in 1960, changes were made, and communes were broken and collective farms returned. Now let's talk about the Cultural Revolution in China. In 1966, Mao launches the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, which meant great revolution to create a working class culture. The Little Red Book, which was a collection of Mao's thoughts, became like a Bible for the Chinese communists. It was supposedly the most important source of knowledge in all areas. The Red Guards are formed to cleanse Chinese society. Whoa, what just happened? Okay, alright, we're back. The Red Guards are formed to cleanse Chinese society of impure elements guilty of taking the capitalist road. Temples, foreigner books, and foreign music was destroyed. People were attacked, humiliated, and even killed if they opposed Mao's thoughts. They wanted nothing to do with capitalism anymore. Changes in China and the end of the Cultural Revolution. During the 1950s and 1960s, the Chinese government made changes. Women could now take part in politics and had equal marital rights. Children were encouraged to report negative comments their parents made about the government. Mao wanted a permanent revolution. Oh, something happened again. Oh, I think we're back. Mao wanted a permanent revolution, but some Communist Party members and military officers disagreed with his thoughts. The people were also not happy with the Red Guard's actions, so they began to turn against the government. In 1976, Mao Zedong died at the age of 82, and a group of practical-minded reformers, led by Deng Xiaoping, seized power and brought the Cultural Revolution to an end. Okay, so now you have China and the Cold War, and I do apologize if there's any background noise. Outside, there's got people playing music, you know. So, 1949, the Cold War spreads from Europe to East Asia. From Europe to Asia, after China sets a communist regime. In 1950, China signs a pact of friendship with the Soviet Union. Now, war breaks out in Korea, and China's involvement in that war isolates them from major Western powers. Now China relies on the Soviet Union for technological and economic aid. But in the late 1950s, China and the Soviet Union begin to deteriorate because of their different views. You see, China wanted the Soviets to promote world revolution, but the Soviets were trying to improve relations with the West, and they refused. So they disagreed. They had a little disagreement between each other. So in 1972, China improves relations with the U.S., and as the years went by, improved relations with the Western states and the Soviet Union. Now, an important part of the Cold War were the Proxy Wars. So what's a proxy war? Two powers in conflict use substitutes instead of fighting each other directly. The European nations were divided into two armed camps in which they depended on the major powers, the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Neither the Soviet Union or the U.S. wanted to fight each other, so they fought a series of proxy wars instead. So you have other major alliances forming and important Cold War conflicts. You have the Southeast Asia Treaty. It had the United States, Great Britain, France, Pakistan, the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand. This treaty was meant to stem communist aggression in the East. Now you have the Central Treaty Organization. It had Turkey, Iraq, Pakistan, Great Britain, and the United States. This treaty was meant to prevent Soviet expansion into the Middle East. The wars that broke out in Korea and Vietnam were two of the major conflicts of the Cold War. A Cold War proxy